Hello everyone. What is the most terrifying thought for each of us? This is the thought of death. A person becomes horrified when he imagines the moment when he takes his last breath. And how children who have lost their parents suffer. And how tormented are the parents left without children. However, there is no need to be afraid and tormented beyond measure by this, because numerous testimonies and stories of people who return from the other world left no reason to believe that a person's existence ends with his last breath. And if so, then you need to free yourself from the false fear of death.
I worked in a cemetery for 20 years, I can say that there is something inexplicable, something in another world. Here was one fact from life that simply surprises. Customers came to order a grave, a family burial. In general, it was necessary to bury a father with a son. The young guy laid in the grave, and the mother told us a story. She said that when her son died, after the funeral, she dreamed about him and he said that everything was fine with him. He found a bride for himself and everything was good. Well, she said, a dream was a dream. But when she went to the cemetery 9 days later she saw that next to him is the burial place of the bride that he showed her in a dream. So you may guess whether there is life there or not. And there are many similar stories.
My son was given a wall clock at a sports competition when he was 12 years old. He died at age 14 from cardiac arrest. We have changed the batteries in this watch several times, but it still stops at the time our son leaves.
My father has been gone for 27 years, but I remember the conversation with him as now. During our lifetime we talked about the afterlife, and he told me that we are undying and live in another world. I didn't believe his words, but my father said jokingly that when he dies he will come and tell me how it is. And I was skeptical about this. But this day happened, my father died and I took his death hard. But on the second day of his death I dreamed of him, he appeared smiling, knocking on my window, he shouted, "Anna, I'm alive, open the door for me." I burst into tears and said, "Dad, you're dead." To which he answered me, "Do you remember our conversation that when I die I'll come and prove that we are not dying and we live?" I saw him cheerfully jumping for joy. But knowing in my soul that he could not be here, I never opened the door to my father in a dream. I was afraid. He left shouting to me, "Don't trust anyone, we are not dying and we live there." I woke up in shock, and by the 9th day after his death I had a dream. My father was sitting in a train compartment in the dark and there is everything to eat on the table. I asked him, "Dad, why is there no light? Why is it dark in your place?" And he answered, "You didn't light a candle for me." In the morning I told my mom about this dream. And she confirmed that we forgot to light a candle at his wake. Even from the other world our relatives try to warn us, but we don't understand and do everything the other way around.
I also believe that there is life after death. When my mother died, from famous virus, on her 9th day many of her friends saw her in a dream and she invited them to this day. But since not everyone could come, everyone called me and told me this. And in the morning, it was as if she had entered me and started preparing her favorite dishes. I know how to cook food and know its tastes, but I still cooked it my own way. And the pancakes turned out poorly for me, but she did great. And then the pancakes turned out great, and the soup was with her taste and the roast were awesome. I didn't even have time to cut, cook, fry, I even prayed, "Mommy, not so fast, I don't have time." And the hands themselves walked around the kitchen. I've never seen such a thing. And when lunch came, everyone ate her food, praised for her very much and said that it tasted like her mother cooked when she was alive. And now, several months have already passed since her death, and pancakes are only made in the evening, as she cooked during her life. But they are not received good in the morning, because she is not around. Believe it or not.
I got in an accident. I stood and looked at myself as I was lying in the car as they were shaking me. But a man came up to me and said, "Let us go." I saw me walking over the road above the bushes, and we went into a stone corridor. I was walking next to that man, but I didn't see who it was. I could not raise my head. I saw his shoes and a black cassock, and we went out into a very beautiful light. I saw my parents, I saw strange houses, and I turned my head. Standing next to me was my grandmother. She was a wonderful person, and she said, "But it's too early for you to come here," and she squeezed my hand so hard that it seemed to throw me out of there, and I heard the doctor who said, "That's all, he comes to his senses, give me an injection." And I went out again. Then my aunt told me later on the day of the accident that my grandmother came in her dream and said not to touch me. So you may think whether there is something there or not. And there was an interesting comment on this story: "You were lucky." That suggests that you were met by a distant ancestor, whom you don't know about, but he is the clock gate of your family tree, which is called the world of glory. There are people who hate their roots and despise their parents. And the century does not come for them. The gates to glory will not open for them. They will be completely alone and vulnerable to other alien spirits who will want to lure them to their side. And, in their decaying glory, they will feast on the remains.
My cousin's parents died on the same day, 6 hours apart. The aunt died first, and 6 hours later the uncle. My sister called me on Viber and, sitting next to her dying father, had a conversation with me. Suddenly, I noticed that my father was looking for something on the floor and asked him, "Dad, what are you looking for?" He started telling the amazing things. He said that there was a closed door in front of him and he needed the keys to open it. He immediately began to list all the deceased relatives who met him. He says, "Don't you see, daughter, that the walls have dissolved, they are gone. There is no ceiling and no floor, their apartment is on the 7th floor. A few minutes later he died. And you say that the meeting is unlikely. This is wrong." Also, before his death, a neighbor told his wife that his died parents were meeting him.
2 months ago, my 12-year-old daughter Anna died in a car accident. I can't find the strength to live on. How is she doing? I dreamed about her next to the Mother of God on the steps, where my daughter was talking to the Mother of God and asking her, "Is there a prayer so that I can pray and my mother will stop crying? How can I continue to live?"
My mother and her older brother quarreled, and during their lifetime they did not speak for several years. And then one day my mother had a dream, as if she saw a cloud, and this cloud was slowly descending, and her brother was standing on the cloud and said to her, "Forgive me." He asked for forgiveness 3 times. And my mother told him, "Well, I've been around for a long time, I forgave you a long time ago." It seemed that he exhaled with relief, smiled, and the cloud began to rise. And the doorbell rang and they brought an urgent telegram. In 1978, then urgent telegrams were delivered immediately. The telegram said, "You have to come, your brother has died." Here's the story. I am a rehabilitation specialist at the Rehabilitation Center in the Gerontological Department. Almost every day I come across death. So, it's not often, but there are such cases, it's enough to write a book. Some people fall into a coma state of 10 to 15 points according to Glasgow before death. This is a violation of consciousness. If simpler, to being alive or not. They find themselves in other worlds, in purgatory. This is inexplicable at all. Non-believers see the apostles, their died relatives communicate with them, and in one of the wards, the patients, before they died, told how a man in an old frock coat and tall hat came for them, and after a couple of days the patients died. And one day an elderly woman was brought to us. She was in a semi-comatose state and with moderate dementia, oncology for a palliative patient. Her children were traveling to the hospital from another city. On the phone they said that the woman's husband, their father, was looking after their mother. A couple of days ago he was taken to the hospital. And today he died half an hour ago and mother doesn't know anything. They asked not to tell her. I went to see the patient for an initial examination. I saw a dying woman, exhausted by chronic diseases, in a semicoma. I was trying to collect an anamnesis, to understand the degree of consciousness. She suddenly opened her eyes and said in a clear voice, "Hello." She called me by name and surname. I asked, "How do you know me?" She answered, "You see my husband," pointing to one of the corners of the room with her finger, "he told me about you." I asked, "What else is he saying?" She said, "He says that they know you there, upstairs," and points up with her hand. "They especially look after you there and say hello to you." She smiled blissfully and stopped responding to questions. She died an hour later. I gave birth to my son in Alaska in 1986. When he was 3 years old, he came up to me and asked, "Mom, do you remember when we lived in New York and you sent me to the store to buy bread? We have never lived in New York, son, and have not even been passing through there. And how could I send you so little to the store alone? Yes, even now you only go there with Dad or me." "No, Mom. Remind, please remind. We lived in New York, near the road, where the subway is the deepest. Our house was high, with many floors. I went to the store, and you looked at me from the window and waved at me. I ran across the road and was hit by a car. The ambulance arrived and you came running. You sat right on the road, hugged me and cried a lot. Since then, I often think about that unfortunate mother who lost her son. With these thoughts, my heart begins to cry. Maybe she is still mourning him now. But he grew up, only in another life, a big, handsome, kind and loving son, and he has 2 wonderful sons of his own."
My granddaughter, when she was 2 years old, began to tell us that she used to live in a very poor house, where there was no furniture or food and it was always cold. She said, "I had another mother and she loved me very much and pitied me. I didn't have a dad. And now I have a different mother and my house is warm and big, there is a lot of food. I feel sorry for that mother. How she is without me, but I got sick and died."
I took care of a woman with cancer. After her death, I also took care of her old husband. Once there was a vision of her, all in white, walking around in a monastery, walking in nature. And she recognized me and said, "I want to be reborn as a boy at my grandson." I told her widower. He said, "No, it's impossible, our grandson is still very young." 6 months later, their grandson's girlfriend was pregnant. A boy was born, a copy of his deceased grandmother.
I would also like to tell you an incident that happened to the family of my friend and colleague. Her daughter Christina died. The dog tore the girl apart. She was 9 or 10 years old, I don't remember exactly. About 7 months after Christina's funeral, I had a dream. Christina jumped and played. It was dark and cool outside. I told her, "Christy, why are you still jumping around? Let's go home already. Mom and Dad are waiting for you, crying, it's already dark." She said, "I jump because I'm cold." I put a knitted blouse on her. It seemed like I knitted it not for her, but it suited her. Then she told me, "You tell my mom and dad that I will come home soon. As soon as Dad finishes the house, I'll come right away." I looked, and not far away there was an unfinished house, 3 walls without a roof. The walls were whitewashed and clean. The next day I called my friend and congratulated her on her pregnancy. She was very surprised and said that she had not told anyone about the pregnancy yet, even her husband did not know, because she had just found out about it from the doctor. She assumed that her doctor told me, but I told her my dream. We were both stunned by all this. Well, we were waiting for the birth. A girl was born. They called her Karina. She has the same face as Christina. She also burped a little. She had the same hobbies. Once they took her to the cemetery to visit her grandfather, grandmother, and her sister was there. When she saw Christina's portrait, she asked, "Is this me?" A few years later, my family from the north moved to live in the south. And so my friend and Karina came to visit us unexpectedly. They had not agreed in advance and we were not expecting them. In the evening it was cool outside and without thinking automatically, I took out a blouse from the closet that I had knitted for the neighbor's girl. It suited Karina well and gave it to her. Then I knitted another one for the neighbor's girl. Early in the morning Karina ran into my room, dived under my blanket and started the following conversation. Have you ever had terrible dreams? Yes. And today I had a terrible dream. Can you tell me? And she began to tell. When we still lived in our old house, Mom and Dad were at work, and I was at home alone. I was sleeping and woke up to the smell of smoke in the room. I got up and went to my parents' room. Then my mother came in running. She was very scared for me. But Karina told me what actually happened to her died sister, not to her. My friend and I were in deep shock. So I believe in reincarnation 100%. And one more thing, my sister's granddaughter, when she was little, really asked her granny for scissors. My sister didn't let her. The girl begged, cried and was all in tears and told her, when I was your grandmother, I gave you everything. That's it.
My granddaughter is my mother. She told me about that when she was little. And she said that I didn't want to give birth to her, and that's why she chose Monica, my daughter. And she said that her husband was Jason. This was in my mother's first marriage. That's right.
Well, if we don't see our loved ones, if there is nothing on the other side, then what is the point in life? Only the hope of meeting and faith in continuation supports us after the departure of our loved ones. That's all for today. Subscribe to the channel, leave your comment or a story and activate the notification bell not to miss our new videos. Bye bye.